It was the early morning hours of August 19th, 1984, in the quiet Bristoe Station subdivision of Manassas, Virginia, a place where families lived peacefully, children played in manicured yards, and neighbors knew each other by name. But in that calm suburban neighborhood, a knock at the door would set in motion one of the most haunting mysteries in Virginia law enforcement history. A Virginia State Trooper, just 31 years old, a husband and father, would not live to see another sunrise. His death was not only brutal, but it also left behind a trail of questions that remain unanswered decades later. So what really happened that fateful morning at a quiet family residence? And why, after all these years, does the truth remain stubbornly out of reach? This is the story of Johnny Bowman. Hello friends, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. Let's step back into Virginia, and Manassas in particular, in the mid-1980s. Manassas was a city steeped in history. Known as the site of the First and Second Battles of Bull Run during the Civil War, its name long tied to conflict and bloodshed. But by the 1980s it had transformed. This was a growing suburban community within reach of Washington, D.C., attracting young families looking for affordable homes, safer neighborhoods, and the convenience of commuting to jobs in the capital. Virginia in the 1980s was also a state balancing tradition with rapid modernization. Northern Virginia, where Manassas sits, was a hub of technology and federal defense jobs, fueling rapid growth, while other parts of the state still held on to an older way of life. It was, by and large, a period of suburban expansion, economic optimism, and a prevailing sense of stability. That's why the murder of a young state trooper in his own home, a man sworn to protect, sent shockwaves far beyond Manassas. It shattered that illusion of suburban peace and security. The victim was Virginia State Trooper Johnny Bowman. At 31 years old, he was a former Marine, standing an imposing 6'2" and 180 pounds, affectionately known as Big John. He'd been a trooper for about 5 years. Friends described him as kind, tall, and lanky, with a soft accent. More than just an officer, Johnny was a dedicated family man and a handyman, often seen mowing his yard or playing with his 2-year-old daughter, Nikki. He lived with his wife, Terry, a security officer for IBM Manassas, and little Nikki in a townhouse on Patterson Place in the Bristoe Station subdivision. In the days before his death, he had been working double shifts, patrolling the Prince William County Fair. A committed professional, a loving father, a seemingly ordinary life, about to be tragically and mysteriously cut short. The night of August 18, 1984 was like any other for the Bowman family. Johnny, Terry, and Nikki were all in the house. Johnny's brother Bobby and sister-in-law Doris were also staying that night. Interestingly, it was Bobby and Doris's first visit to the house. Their quiet was shattered in the early morning hours. At approximately 4:15 a.m., the front doorbell rang. Terry had fallen asleep on the couch downstairs, but heard it. Johnny, in their second-floor bedroom, heard it too. Terry recounted that the doorbell rang twice. The first time she got up, looked out the side double windows in the dining room, but saw nothing, so she laid back down on the couch. When the doorbell rang a second time, she saw that Johnny had turned a light on upstairs, and she decided to let him answer. Johnny didn't turn on any other lights as he approached the front door. He opened it just a few inches when, without warning, the assailant forced his way in. In the dim light, Terry could only make out the dark outlines of Johnny and his attacker. She initially thought he was simply beating Johnny, unable to comprehend the true horror taking place. Police later theorized that the killer struck before the door was fully opened. The assailant plunged a knife into Johnny's upper chest, puncturing his pulmonary artery and stomach. Johnny immediately doubled over. As he stumbled into the foyer, the killer struck again, slashing his face, shoulder, back, and neck. Johnny fell to the floor, curling into a fetal position, defenseless. The assailant continued the brutal attack, plunging the knife into Johnny's side and legs as he lay there. In an attack that lasted less than 3 minutes, Johnny was stabbed and slashed a horrifying 42 times. He was dressed only in his shorts. Found in the foyer of his home, Johnny was rushed to Prince William Hospital, but despite the efforts, he died 45 minutes later. Terry, traumatized and seeing only dark outlines, caught a fleeting glimpse of the assailant, but tragically could not identify him. but the killer left behind some critical clues as he fled. Investigators found a pair of aviator-style eyeglasses, an auburn Italian-made wig, and a beige construction hard hat. Police weren't sure if the assailant was actually wearing these items during the attack or if they were deliberately left behind to try and stage the scene, to throw them off the trail. This is a detail that immediately raises eyebrows, suggesting a calculated attempt at misdirection. Crucially, DNA evidence was also collected at the scene. In 1984, the technology to analyze DNA was still years away from being widely available. This foresight by investigators would prove vital in the decades to come. The hard hat, in particular, provided an intriguing lead. It had a green sticker with the numeral 1 and an orange $6 price tag sticker. Investigators were able to trace it back to a government surplus facility at the Aberdeen Proving Ground, a U.S. Navy installation in Maryland. From there, it was traced to H&H Campers Haven in Baltimore, where it had been purchased. A specific, tangible thread to follow, connecting the crime scene to a precise purchase hundreds of miles away. The investigation into Johnny's murder quickly became one of the most extensive and expensive murder investigations in Virginia State Police history. An air and ground search lasted 3 days, combing the area for the murder weapon. It has never been found. 18 special agents were assigned to the case, working grueling 12-hour shifts out of 4 adjacent rooms at the Manassas Holiday Inn. They interviewed more than 3,000 individuals across 41 states and investigated over 1,600 tips. Thousands of pages of documents and notes were collected, analyzed, and computerized. This was a massive undertaking, reflecting the importance of the crime. Police theorized early on that the killer was someone who knew Johnny. In 1990, Virginia's Commonwealth Attorney, Paul Ebert, publicly stated that both Johnny and Terry knew the attacker. He even suggested that more than one person might be involved. Another key witness was Johnny's brother, Bobby, who was in the house that morning. Bobby was awakened by Terry's screams, ran downstairs, and actually fought with the attacker. He described the assailant as a black male weighing about 180 pounds. Yet despite Bobby's eyewitness account, investigators did not rule out the possibility that the assailant was a woman. They also claimed that in the dark and covered with blood, a white man might have been mistaken for black. This immediately raises questions about how firm Bobby's identification was, or perhaps how much investigators wanted to keep their options open. The family, however, had their own strong beliefs. They felt the assailants might have already been inside the house before the stabbing occurred. They also suspected Johnny was killed because he possessed incriminating information on them. Terry herself thought it could even be a case of mistaken identity, pointing out that 13 other police officers, including 2 other state troopers, lived in the very same subdivision at the time. Could this truly have been a targeted hit or a horrific case of misidentification? Police, for their part, believed it was a rage killing, but despite the brutality, despite the exhaustive investigation, no motive was ever definitively established. And this, for me, is one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. How can an attack of such intense violence, such personal rage, be committed without any clear reason? There are several things about the investigation that make me question. The physical evidence left behind, the wig, the glasses, the hard hat, presents an immediate contradiction. Were these items meant as a disguise, or were they deliberately planted? If it was a rage killing, as police believed, why the elaborate disguise attempts? And if it was an attempted staging, why such specific, traceable items like the hard hat from a government surplus store in Maryland? The fact that investigators were unsure if the assailant was wearing the items or intended to stage the scene highlights the confusion this evidence created from the very beginning. This lack of certainty around such key items is a significant crack in the investigation's foundation. And then there's the question of the weapon, a knife. To attack a trained Marine and state trooper, a physically imposing man known as Big John, with just a knife, and to inflict 42 wounds in less than 3 minutes, suggests an assailant driven by incredible rage, or perhaps a surprise attack so swift and brutal that Johnny had no chance to react. It also makes you wonder about the attacker's own physical strength, or if there truly was more than one person involved. The absence of the murder weapon is also a glaring hole, leaving yet another piece of the puzzle missing. The discrepancy between Bobby's description of a black male and the investigators not ruling out a woman is also significant. Was Bobby's account less reliable in the darkness and chaos, or were investigators looking to broaden the scope due to other unconfirmed leads? The family's belief that the attackers were already inside the house also contrasts sharply with the narrative of Johnny answering the doorbell. This suggests a fundamental difference in how parties perceive the timeline and the nature of the intrusion. Was this a carefully planned ambush, or a spontaneous explosion of violence? Without a clear motive, all these possibilities remain open, feeding the mystery. The murder of Trooper Johnny Bowman sent a profound shockwave through the Manassas community and the entire state of Virginia. The idea that a law enforcement officer could be brutally murdered at his own doorstep, in his own home, was deeply unsettling. This hits home, the feeling that even a protector in his sanctuary wasn't safe. Funeral services were held at the Lee Funeral Home in Manassas, with Reverend Ronald R. Jones of the Nokesville United Methodist Church officiating, followed by a private family burial. The turnout was a powerful testament to Johnny's impact and the community's grief. Between 1,200 and 1,400 Virginia state troopers and police from every Virginia jurisdiction attended the funeral. The crowd was so large that many had to listen to the service through loudspeakers set up in the parking lot. Flags across the state were flown at half-mast. It was a public display of mourning, solidarity, and beneath it all, a deep sense of injustice. The personal toll was immense. Terry and Nikki never returned to the townhouse after the killing. Terry would eventually remarry, trying to build a new life after such an unthinkable tragedy. But the scar of Johnny's death remained, particularly for his daughter. To this day, Johnny's killing is not just a tragic statistic. It holds a unique, painful place in history. It's the only unsolved murder of a state trooper in Virginia history. That fact alone speaks volumes about the enduring mystery and the failure to bring justice to this fallen officer and his family. In 1986, police named Perry Worrell as a suspect. Worrell, a fellow trooper, had grown up with Johnny. He resigned after a long administrative leave following the murder, and to this day he is still considered a suspect. However, there has never been enough evidence to charge him. Decades have passed, but the search for answers still goes on. The DNA evidence, so ahead of its time when collected in 1984, was sent to the FBI lab for testing multiple times. First in 1984, then again in the late 90s, and most recently in 2010. Yet despite the advancements in forensic science and the promise of new technology, no suspect has yet been identified through DNA. In 2011, Johnny's daughter Nikki embarked on her own quest for answers. She started a Facebook page, Loving Memory of Virginia State Trooper Johnny Bowman, hoping to collect photos and stories about her father, and perhaps praying for a vital piece of information about his case. So far, however, no new information has surfaced through this effort. It's a testament to a daughter's enduring love and hope for closure. The state continues to recognize the profound injustice. In 2012, 28 years after the murder, a significant $50,000 reward was offered for any information leading to an arrest and conviction in this case. That reward still stands. Evidence of an enduring commitment, but also a stark reminder of the persistent silence surrounding this case. There are some questions about the case that have continued to linger through the decades. From the very beginning, there were two very different views of what happened. To the Bowman family, Johnny's death was no random act. It was targeted and perhaps even planned by people who knew him. To investigators, the brutality looked more like an eruption of rage, sudden and uncontrolled. That divide in perspective has only deepened with time. If it was mistaken identity, then Johnny died for nothing more than living on the wrong street in a neighborhood full of police officers. If it was betrayal by someone he knew, then the tragedy cuts even deeper, an attack at the hands of someone welcomed into his circle. And if the killer truly was another trooper, as police speculate, then the crime didn't just shatter a family. It tore at the very trust inside law enforcement itself. Then there's the wig, glasses, and hard hat left at the scene. Were they clumsy disguises or deliberate misdirection meant to send investigators chasing false leads? And if Johnny and Terry really did know the attacker, as prosecutors suggest, why hasn't it ever led to justice? So what makes more sense to you? A disguise and misdirection to cover a calculated hit, or the chaos of a rage killing that spiraled out of control? The contradictions and unanswered questions only deepen the mystery. What we're left with is a case that refuses to fit neatly into any single explanation. The evidence points in different directions. The theories raise more questions than answers. And decades later, the silence around this case is just as loud as the night it happened. Johnny Bowman's life was cut short in the most personal of ways, at the doorstep of his home where he should have been safest. His death left a daughter to grow up without her father, a family forever searching for answers, and a law enforcement community haunted by the fact that one of their own was struck down in cold blood. Decades later, no one has been held accountable. The case of Trooper Johnny Bowman is not just about the tragic loss of one man. It's about the lingering ache of injustice. In a city with deep historic scars, his story is another reminder that the past never truly lets go. The 1980s promised a sense of security and growth, but for the Bowman family, that promise was brutally broken, tragically shattered, leaving behind a wound that time has yet to heal. What do you think happened to Trooper Bowman? Was it a rage killing by someone known to the family? A tragic case of mistaken identity, or something else entirely? The silence around this case is deafening. If you have any thoughts or theories about the case, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.